My wife Lynn and I have been together for 6 years and married for 11 months. Our entire history together has been very normal, and never once have I noticed any weird behaviors or red flags. I can't stress enough how out of character this whole thing is for her. Lynn is very kind, intelligent, and thoughtful. She's always been the no nonsense type of person, being childish or trying to scare me. This is not something she'd normally do. She doesn't even like watching horror movies. When we first started dating, she agreed to watch The Shining with me because she knew how much I loved horror. She was so scared that she didn't even make it through half of the movie before we had to turn it off. She isn't into anything creepy and has never been into pranks as well. It's just not her cup of tea. That's fine. But that's what that's what was so strange about this. It's just so unlikely her. I should also add that she never had any mental health issues as far as I'm aware. It didn't run into her family. I know some people are able to hide their mental health problems, but in the 6 years we've been together, I think I'd have seen some sort of sign. 2 months ago, I was in the kitchen making myself some coffee before work. I was running a bit late that morning and I knew I wouldn't be able to make it to Dunkin' Donuts for my usual morning fix. I took a sip of my coffee as I hurried down the hall towards the door when I happened to notice Lynn peeking at me from around the corner ahead of me. I could only see her eyes and a strand of her long dark hair hanging against the wall. The rest of her body was concealed behind the corner. I nearly spilled my coffee when I saw her. I did burn the shit out of my lips. Geez, Lynn, I said, whipping a few drops of my coffee from my pants. You scared the shit out of me. She immediately popped out of the view like a little kid that had been caught. I heard her scurrying off towards the living room, and by the time I got through the front door, she was out of sight. It was really weird and just totally out of character for her. Like I said, but I found it kind of funny, you know, that she was being more playful and a little less serious. I shouted that I loved her and called her a weirdo as I shut the door behind me. I heard her laughing. Her behavior was a bit odd, but it certainly wasn't something to call a priest over. I forgot about it by lunch, and then by the time I got home, she was her normal self. I didn't bring it up, neither did she, and life went on. The next incident happened 3 days later. It was around 2 a.m., and I had woken up to get a drink. I was standing at the kitchen island, had a jug of OJ in my hand, when I felt a strong feeling that I was being watched. For whatever reason, I looked down at the floor and saw my wife's smiling face staring back. She was speaking at me from the other side of the island, staring up at me while unblinking the eyes and grinning like a monster or something. I screamed. I'll admit it, not out of irritation but fear. For some reason, at that moment, I was very scared. At the sound of my scream, Lynn scuttled back out of my view, her hands and feet smacking the tile floor as she hurried out of the kitchen on all four. I didn't run after her or even yell after her. I just stood there, frozen in shock, wondering what the fuck had possessed her to do that. It took me a little longer than that to, go back upstairs, but eventually I did. When I got to our bedroom, Lynn was laying on her side, asleep, or at least pretending to be. I stood there for a while, watching her breathing to be sure she was really asleep. I had the feeling she might jump out of the bed at that moment and, scare me or something. But she did not. I climbed into the bed and she didn't even move. Her breathing was soft, deep, and I was starting to wonder if I had dreamt the whole thing. I don't know. The next morning, I waited for her to come down for a coffee. After handing her a mug and kissing her cheek, I decided to ask her about it. What was that about last night? I asked, keeping my tone light so, I don't offend her or embarrass her or something. She frowned over a cup of coffee, shaking her head like she had no clue what I was referring to. You're peeking at me again. From over there, I said, pointing to the spot on the floor by the kitchen land. She followed my gaze, and when she looked back at me, she burst out laughing. She laughed so hard that I couldn't help but join her. You creep me the fuck out sometimes, you know that? I said. She giggled and set her cup on the counter and wrapped her arms around my neck. You creep me out all the time. So I guess we are even? She teased and smiled. We said our goodbyes and left for work. As I drove, I kept thinking about how creepy it had been seeing her grinning at me from behind the island like that. The sound of her hands on the floor and how she crawled away. Everything. I told myself she was just trying to be silly, just trying to join me in my love of all things horror. It's not like I was afraid of her or something, but still, it just, you know, just didn't sit right with me. I started seeing her peeking at me more and more. Sometimes she'd be peeking out from behind the couch or living room curtains or, a countertop, a table. Once she even managed to get inside her grandma's old trunk that sits at the foot of our bed. I might not have even known she was there at all had the trunk's old hinges not given her away. She'd had the lid popped up just enough so that only half of her face peeked through. She'd been grinning like an excited toddler. It was, you know, very uncomfortable. I didn't even know what to say to her. All I could do was stare. When I finally found my voice, I asked her, why on earth was she doing this? She didn't even answer, but she had slowly closed the lid, shutting herself inside the trunk. I, I just walked away. I was done feeling disturbed and frustrated. I didn't understand why she was doing it, but it clearly made her happy. I just hoped she would get tired of the game and, just quit on it. Didn't peek at me for the next about 2 weeks. I started to think she was done with that. Her weird prank and, everything was over. We were watching a show on Netflix one night, and I jokingly said that I hadn't seen her peeking at me lately, and she must have given up on her spying game. She looked up at me and a small smile said, maybe. I've just gotten better at it. I did, I, I did nothing and I didn't say anything, but I wondered whether or not she was joking. For the next few days, I just couldn't stop thinking about what she said. Was she still peeking at me when I wasn't looking? And I just didn't notice? And if so, what the hell was she getting out of this? I started to feel paranoid, constantly checking whether she was watching me around the corner, from behind the door. I was jumpy whenever I was home and she wasn't in the full view of me. I felt stupid and a little crazy. But after a few weeks without another incident, I began to relax. I stopped checking behind the furniture and walls and told myself it was over. Then a few days ago, things got much worse. Lynn left to go to a friend's house and I just I just decided to sit on my couch and play some games on my laptop. Around 9 in the night, I hopped in the shower and as I was washing the soap from my hair, I felt that awful feeling that I was being watched. I slowly opened my eyes and almost had a fucking heart attack. Lynn was peeking from behind the shower curtain, her entire head stretched into the shower, leaving just her body outside. Her long dark hair hung against the curtain, the ends dripping with the water. Her mouth hung open in a terrible grin, eyes wide and red, as if she hadn't blinked in a while. I screamed and jumped back against the wall. She didn't even move, nor did her smile go away. Her makeup ran down her cheeks with two black stains from her mascara. She looked giddy and completely deranged. I was terrified. We stood like that there for a few moments, neither of us saying a word. Finally, after what felt like forever, she slowly pulled her head back out of the shower, and I watched her blurry figure through the curtain as she moved backwards towards the bathroom door. A second later, the bathroom door slammed shut, hard enough to rattle the mirror. I screamed again and jumped out of the shower to lock the door. I stayed inside the bathroom for over an hour. Maybe I overreacted to some of you, but joke or not, I wasn't going to put up with this crazy shit anymore. That's what I kept telling myself as I paced in the bathroom, stopping to listen at the door every few minutes. Suddenly, I heard a muffled sound, and I pressed my ear against the bathroom door to listen. I couldn't hear anything, but I envisioned Lynn standing on the other side of the door, giggling at her joke. I felt a surge of anger. I was beyond pissed at being mad and being made to feel scared in my own house and made to hide in the bathroom for an hour. All for what? Some fucking joke? If it was a joke, it was an awful one. What the hell, Lynn? I snapped. This shit is getting really fucking annoying. I waited for her to apologize or to call me a jerk. Just something, but instead I heard a faint moan. So quiet that you know, I wondered if I had even heard it. And then, complete silence. Lynn! I called out, not able to even hide the shakiness in my voice. I got no response, just my own heavy breathing. I swear to God, just stop it, I yelled, pounding my fist on the door. I waited her to cuss me out or something, I would expect from her. I never screamed at her before, but there was nothing, just the occasional drip from the shower head. I won't deny that I was scared, too afraid to open the damn door and face my own wife. I waited another 30 minutes or so, which feels like a fucking lifetime when you're scared. Finally, I decided I wasn't going to spend the night hiding in my own bathroom. So I got down on my knees and peeked through the underside of the door. I almost expected to see her face peeking back at me, but thankfully I didn't. I could see straight down the hallway to the top of the stairs, but no Lynn. I didn't know if I should be happy that she's not there. I looked for a few more minutes, waiting to see her head pop out or, something, but that never happened. I stood up, my hand hovering over the door, and mentally prepared myself to open it. I slowly turned the lock with shaky fingers and was about to yank it open when I heard a sound that still makes me feel nervous when I think about it. A moan, louder than before, but this time I was able to tell just where it was coming from. I turned my head to the closet door as if in slow motion and looked at my wife, who was peeking out at me from the slight gap of the closet. Her eyes were still wide as ever, and her mouth was hanging open in the most creepy, gaping smile I'd ever seen. I didn't even scream. I was too scared for even that. Her hands were clasped to the chest, body trembling in sheer delight, as if she could barely contain her excitement. A short moan bubbled up from her throat, deep and raw, sending a shiver through my entire body. Somehow, I found the ability to pull the bathroom door open and run as fast as I could all the way down the steps, snagging my keys and phone from the table in the living room before running outside to my car. I could hear her shrill laughter behind me, but I didn't hear her getting closer. I didn't bother shutting the front door. I just I just wanted to go away. I drove away from the house faster than I legally should have, shivering the entire time, either from fear or the cold, maybe a little of both. I hadn't grabbed a coat or even a pair of shoes. I was still in my boxers and my hair was still damp. I drove straight to my brother Chris's house, which is about 40 minutes away, ignoring any and every call and text I got. I didn't check my phone until I was safely parked in my brother's driveway. Lynn had called 4 times and sent a flurry of texts, all wondering where I'd gone and why did I leave like that. I threw my phone at the dash in a rage, furious at her nonchalant attitude. My brother and his wife were surprised to see me, especially dressed in just a pair of boxers, but told me to stay as long as I needed. Chris lent me some clothes and asked me what happened. I told him Lynn and I had a fight, but didn't get into any details. Basically, I didn't want him to know what happened. Leaving my wife over a prank even if it was a strange one. It didn't feel right. I mean, hadn't I encouraged her for years to lighten up instead of being so serious all the time? I had wanted her to relax and loosen up, but this wasn't it. This was definitely not what I had in mind. I tried to sleep on the sofa, but my brain wouldn't let me sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Lynn and her face staring back at me from inside the closet. Knowing she'd been in there with me the entire time made my skin crawl. She'd never left the fucking bathroom at all. Instead, she slipped inside the closet and slammed the bathroom door shut to fool me. The mere thought of going back home gave me anxiety. I tossed and turned, unable to sleep. Chris ended up giving me a sleeping pill, so I was able to get some rest. My sleep was filled with terrible dreams, all of Lynn's creepy, smiling face. I woke up just as the sun started to rise. My sore body ached from the sofa, and I felt drained. I knew I'd have to call Lynn at some point, but I didn't know what to say to her. I wouldn't be going home unless she gave me her word that she'd never do that creepy shit anymore. I just wanted my wife back. Her normal, serious, never joking, and never looking at me like that kind of wife back. I was contemplating calling her and telling her that when that familiar feeling came over me, I was being watched. I was staring at the ceiling, my heart in my throat. I didn't want to look away, but the longer I ignored the feeling, the worse it got. My eyes drifted away from the ceiling almost on their own. Her face was pressed against the window beside the couch, staring down at me with that same gaping, creepy smile. Drool dribbled down her lips, leaving two long streaks down the glass. I didn't know how long she'd been there, but something told me she'd been there quite a while, possibly all night. I didn't bother screaming. Even though I was afraid, I was more angry, and anger trumped any fear I felt at that moment. I jumped up from the couch and pounded my palm against the glass. Lynn, are you crazy? What the hell is wrong with you? Just go home. Just go. Now. She didn't move, and her expressions never changed. If anything, her smile only grew, as if she had never been more excited and happy. I could hear Chris and his wife moving around upstairs, as if Lynn could hear them from her place outside. Her head twitched slightly in their direction, and she began to close her mouth slowly. Chris called my name from upstairs, obviously concerned. I turned to see his wife Rebecca, hurrying down the stairs. When I turned back to the window, she was gone. The only sign she was ever there was the drool still dripping down the glass. I tried explaining to Chris and Rebecca what happened about waking up to see Lynn watching me through the window. They were skeptical. Who wouldn't be? Chris and I went outside to see, spot the front of the window, but there were no footprints in the dirt, just nothing. Chris guessed, and I didn't argue. He and Rebecca assumed that I dreamt the entire episode, but they didn't understand, and I was too tired to explain it to them. I called out of work that day and turned my cell phone off. I didn't want to face Lynn. Just talking to her was too much for me at this point. I really started to believe something was irreversibly wrong with her. That no matter what promises she made, we'd never be the same again. The thought saddened me to my core. I cried most of the morning. By the noon, I figured I was ready to confront her, give her one last chance to explain herself. I could at least give her that after 6 years, I told myself. I turned my phone on and saw the dozens of texts she had sent, all from a seemingly concerned wife. Can we talk? I love you. Please call me. I'm really worried. Can you answer? Just come home. And more of the same. All of those texts telling me she loved me and she wanted me home. How worried she was. Not a damn one addressing the crazy shit that she pulled. Like she hadn't been acting like a character from Stephen King book. Even her texts were different. She normally texted novels just to tell me to pick up a loaf of bread. You'd think she'd have more to say to me after her bizarre shenanigans. I knew it probably seems too childish to some of you who are miles away from the situation. But if you saw the way Lynn had looked at me, how she was smiling like a creep from inside the closet, then I think you'd find my reaction it was it was warranted. I ended up staying with Chris and Rebecca for another night. I didn't wake up yesterday until afternoon, and thankfully I didn't see Lynn's face watching me through the window. I don't want to pry because it's not my place. But is this fight something that can be, you know, resolved? Rebecca asked. She'd made us both a sandwich for lunch, and I knew she wanted to breach the subject without seeming to be nosy. I didn't know. I just don't know. She's like a different person, I said, choosing my words carefully. I still wasn't ready for her and Chris to know the full extent of the batshit craziness I had been dealing with. People change, Ben, but she's still the same woman you married. Maybe you both just need to talk through your issues. Whatever's going on, I'm sure it can be fixed, she said. I think it's beyond that now. I don't think thinking or talking would help. I just don't trust her. I said the words stung in my heart. I missed and loved my wife. But how could I live with a person like that, living in constant fear, you know. It didn't sound too appealing to me. Lynn loves you. She has to be absolutely crushed, Rebecca said. I don't know about that, I replied. Well, she certainly seemed like that to me. I've never seen her so upset, very much unlike the Lynn I know, Rebecca said, shaking her head sadly. It took me a full minute for her words to really sink in and understand what she had said. Wait, what? What do you mean? You saw her? You saw Lynn? I asked her, my mouth suddenly dry. Rebecca nodded casually, as if that fact wasn't a nightmare. Maybe for her, it wasn't. She stopped by this morning just after Chris left for work. She said, cleaning the plates from the table. I didn't see her car through. Maybe she took an Uber or something? Rebecca, what did she say? Did, did she come inside? I asked, sweat starting to break out from my forehead. I began looking around, examining corners as though a predator lurked from behind. No, she just asked if you were awake yet, and I said you weren't. I asked her if she wanted for me to, wake you up or something. She just said I should let you sleep, Rebecca said, washing the dishes. That's all. She didn't say anything else. No, she just looked awful though, like she hadn't slept in days. I really think you should call her. I got up from the table and thanked Rebecca for lunch. And I felt better at the knowledge that at least she hadn't come inside. Still, I needed to double check that the doors were locked. I sat for a while, trying to figure out what to do. I didn't want to go home, but I felt that I owed it to Lynn to help her if I could. Hadn't I swore an oath to love and honor her through sickness and in health? Clearly, she was very sick. If she was sick, which I truly believed she was, I had to try and get her the help she needed. But I didn't even know where to start. I don't want to call the police. And besides, what the hell was I going to tell them? That my wife was peeking at me? That she was being creepy? As bizarre as all of this was, and she'd been, she still hadn't committed any crime. Not yet, anyways. The police would have probably said that I was overreacting. But this wasn't some prank. It felt wrong, dangerous even. Like something sinister lurked beneath her smile. I knew as a husband I was very well within my rights to have her committed. But what if she simply acted normal in their presence? She'd obviously been able to fool Rebecca into thinking she was just a concerned wife. As long as the doctors didn't find her in a danger to herself or others, they'd have no choice but to release her after the first 72 hours. I felt lost and overwhelmed. So I did what any husband in my position would do. I called her mother. Believe me, I didn't want to. Her mother, Marilyn, and I We were never on the best of terms. We never fought or anything like that. But, you know, she's just wasn't a very warm person and wasn't really easy to get along with. She hardly even smiled, and when she did, only her lips would move into a thin smile, leaving her eyes as blank as before. She gave off this aura that felt like she was, you know, permanently offensed or something. I'd only met her twice, and both times were for such short visits. I got the impression she didn't approve of me for her daughter. Lynn always ushered us out quickly, as she didn't want me to feel uncomfortable, which I was grateful for at the time. Being in her mother's company felt most unbearable, like walking on glass. I was glad when I moved 3 states away, so we didn't have to see her often. I was happy to avoid the woman, but I needed her help. I really didn't want to talk to her at all, but I had to talk to someone and someone who knew Lynn better than me. So I did it. Yes, she answered, already sounding irritated. Hey, it's Ben. Do you have a minute to talk? I asked. I could hear her cluck her tongue in irritation. She said, I'm in the middle of writing some checks, but if you insist, I suppose I can spare a moment. What is it that you want to discuss, Benjamin? She said, very cold. It's about Lynn. She's been acting strangely, and I was wondering if you had any idea whether there was something. It's a bit difficult to follow your rambling, Benjamin. What is it that you want from me? She asked. I could almost see her standing there in her thin sweater and slacks, tapping her fingernails impatiently on the table. I wanted to know if you'd ever noticed any odd behavior, or probably any mental health issues. I asked. There was a long, uncomfortable pause that I couldn't tell was because she was just thinking or something else. Finally, after a few seconds, she spoke. I'm not sure if this is one of your jokes, Benjamin, but if so, I didn't find the humor in it. Now I do have business to attend, as I've said. So if you don't mind, she said, but I cut her off before she could get rid of me. Look, it's not a joke. I'm sincerely concerned about Lynn's mental health. Her behavior has been very erratic lately. I'm very worried about her, and I figured as her mother you would be as well. I said my frustration was evident in my voice. If you're truly concerned, then I suggest you get the health professionals involved. I don't know what you expect of me. She snapped. I could tell she was seconds away from hanging up, and for some reason I was desperate not to let her. I had the feeling that she knew a lot more than she was letting on. Please, if not for me, do it for Lynn. I heard a faint, shaky intake of breath, as if she were trying to hold her, you know, thoughts or something. Excuse me, what's wrong? Benjamin, I don't know what to tell you. My only advice would be to seek professional help. Do not call here again. Goodbye. I tried to call out to her, but she'd hung up. I tried to wrap my head around the call, her refusal to help me. Even if she didn't like me, why wouldn't she want to help her own daughter? I couldn't understand. I tried to replay the conversation, desperate to find something I missed. After a while, I almost gave up until I remember her last words: seek professional help. She said those words with a bit of urgency. I could have just been grasping at straws, but no, I was sure her voice had changed ever so slightly when she said that, as if they were very important. What had she meant? I assumed she'd been referring to medical professionals, but maybe, just maybe, she was referring to something else. Someone that she didn't, for some reason, feel comfortable saying directly. Or maybe I was just being paranoid. I waited for Chris to get home, and after a very long and exhausting conversation with him and Rebecca, I convinced them that Lynn truly needed psychiatric help. I didn't tell them everything. I wasn't prepared to go into it yet. But I told them about our last encounter, how she'd hidden in the bathroom, peeking at me from the closet. They were obviously shocked, but thankfully they believed me. They too just wanted to help her. Still, they didn't think it was all that serious. Weird, maybe, but not dangerous. They just kept saying that Lynn had to be playing some kind of a weird joke. Maybe for YouTube, Rebecca offered, if only half heartedly. Chris didn't think we should involve the police just yet. He offered instead to go with me, and I readily accepted. He reasoned that calmly talking to her, trying to coax her into going willingly, was the best recourse. I agreed to do it this way. At least I wouldn't be going into that house alone. We drove over this morning, just after breakfast. There was no way I was going at the night. When we pulled into the driveway, my stomach began doing some somersaults. Her car wasn't there, but I still didn't let my guard down. The front door was ajar, and for a split second, I thought I thought we'd see her eyes staring through the gap. I was shaking and starting to sweat. Chris, however, was fine. He waited for me to open the door, his hands in his pocket, like he was going on a fucking stroll in the park or something. I I truly envied his ignorance. I pushed the door open and was immediately hit with the stench of rot. Chris smelled it too, and he walked in the house behind me with his nose scrunched up. What do you guys use to clean the floor around here? Shit, Chris mumbled. Shut up, I said, my eyes darting around for any sight of Lynn. The house was deadly quiet and dark despite being 10 in the morning. All the curtains were closed up tight, refusing to allow any sunlight inside. If I hadn't left it just 2 days prior, I'd have thought the house to be an abandoned one. We moved through each room, carefully checking any place that she might hide, occasionally calling her name. Why the fuck are you looking under the couch? Chris asked eventually. Aren't we looking for your wife? He said, and he was looking at me like I was a moron. Let's just go upstairs, I said. He shook his head and just followed me. I went to check the bathroom and the spare bedroom. On the way up, my shoes crunched over a piece of glass that looked to be littered over a few of the steps. I noticed that one of Lynn's and my wedding portraits that hung up on the wall along the staircase had been smashed. The frame hung crookedly, all the glass removed. I stared at the picture, a lump foaming in my throat. We had taken the photo just after leaving the church. After saying our vows, she looked so beautiful in her white gown. I looked at Lynn's beautiful face. I never dreamt her face would ever be a source of terror to me. We climbed the rest of the steps and checked the spare bedroom, but it looked completely untouched. I was hesitant to go into the bathroom. My fear from that night was still there. Chris noticed, and you know, I couldn't do anything. He offered to go in by himself, but I couldn't let him do that. So we walked in together, checking the closet and the shower. The bathroom looked as if it hadn't been touched since the night I left. I don't think she's here, Ben. Why don't you pack some clothes and we'll try coming back tomorrow? Chris said. I nodded and went into the bedroom and shoved some clothes into a duffel bag. When I checked inside of a closet, I came across the source of the smell and gagged. Chris looked and lost all color in his face. He had to go stand by the stairs to get away from the sight and that smell. I gazed down in shock at what lay inside my bedroom closet. Soaking into the rug were at least a dozen eyeballs, all carefully laid out in pairs. Some were large as a quarter, while others were as tiny as a marble. I stared down at the eyes she'd collected from small animals, and I wondered how she'd gotten them. Damn, man. I thought I had it bad with Rebecca's shoe addiction. But fuck me. Your wife's in here collecting eyeballs? Chris said, gagging. Ben, I think we should go. He called from the hall, and I'm getting nervous, nauseous. All right. I grabbed my duffel and shut the door. I stepped out into the hall and took a deep breath. I could taste the rot on my tongue, and I couldn't help but gag. Who the fuck lines up eyeballs in their closet like that? I tried to tell you. She needed help. Dude, she doesn't need help. She needs a fucking exorcism. You coming or what? I can't stand the smell anymore. His words died in his throat, and his eyes grew wide with fear. I didn't ask him why. I could feel it. Someone was watching me, and then and I didn't think it was the eyes in the closet. I turned around, my eyes slowly scanning the bedroom. Christ, I whispered as I finally saw what we'd missed. Under the bed, curled on her side, watching us with the excitement of a kid on a Christmas morning, was my wife. She held her hands together just under her chin, and they were shaking eagerly. Now that she knew she'd been found, I could hear the quiet noises she was making, a sort of hiccuping sound in her throat, as if the excitement was just too much for her. It was it was to say the least terrifying. Wide eyes and that same huge smile. Everything in me told myself to run, but I forced it away. This was my wife. No matter how twisted, she was still the woman I married. I had to help her. Lynn, I said softly. She didn't respond, but her head bobbled back and forth in two quick little movements as if she was nodding. Baby, I just want to help you, okay? Can you please, can you please let me do that? I asked. I had taken a single step forward, approaching her like some kind of a dangerous animal. I love you, Lynn, I said softly, taking another step closer. She let a tiny moan escape her wide open mouth, and I had to resist the urge to run. Her shoulders were starting to move, and her eyes grew as large as they could. I crouched down so I could see her better and immediately saw the blood. Her hands were covered in it. They trembled more the closer I got, as if she was barely able to contain herself. Lynn, are you hurt? You're bleeding, I said. She bobbed her head again, her bloody fingers moving up and down as if playing an invisible piano. They occasionally grazed her chin, leaving smears of blood on her skin. I wanted to recoil in disgust. The smell that was coming off of her was revolting. I could feel the vomit trying to climb up my throat. Her lips were dry and stretched thin, blood sipping in between the cracks. I knew she wouldn't come out on her own. I didn't want to leave her in the state she was in. I just got a little closer and reached out to her. The excited hiccuping sound got louder, and her hands shook, fingers flexing. It was then that I could see the blood oozing from in between her fingers. Oh my God, Lynn, you're bleeding. I said instinctively. I reached out to take her hand, but before I could even touch her, her hand sprung out towards me. A sharp pain shot through my arm, and I fell back on my ass. My arm burned, and I could see the blood dripping onto the carpet. I looked back at her in shock, and she was grinning madly, her fingers clutching a large shred of glass. You all right in there? Chris asked from behind me. I turned my head slightly and nodded to him, just pushing my arm toward my chest. When I turned back to face Lynn, I saw that her focus had shifted. She wasn't looking at me anymore, and she wasn't smiling either. She was staring past me, her eyes glaring at Chris, the way a hungry lion might stare at an at a prey. Her mouth was still hanging open, but it was twisted into a snarl. I got to my feet and began walking towards down the hall, afraid to take my eyes off her. Are you bleeding? Chris asked. The moment the words left his mouth, Lynn started fast, scouting out from under the bed, and the glass still in her fist. Chris, run! Go! I yelled. He must have been too afraid to move because a second later I felt my back bump into him. He was still standing at the top of the stairs, staring at the horror that was my wife. Lynn had crawled completely out from under the bed and stood in the bathroom doorway, her face twisted in rage. Her whole body was visibly tensed. Blood ran down her fingers and onto the floor. Jesus, Lynn, Chris said. Playing hide and seek or something? I immediately reached back and pushed him towards the outside. Move your ass, Chris, I said as quietly and firmly as I could. Lynn bobbed her head in fast, sharp motions and began to grin, stretching her mouth open wider and wider so that her chin seemed to touch her chest. I heard Chris mutter a prayer and then he was running down the stairs. I stood up at the top of the stairs, stuck between the love of a woman who clearly needed serious help and self preservation. I only want to help, I said, choking back tears. Her eyes focused on me once again as she slowly lifted the glass, holding it out in front of me. And then she started sprinting towards me, grinning with utter excitement. Thankfully, my body overtook and flew down the stairs, skipping 2 or 3 steps at a time. I made it to the front door, and before I felt her leap on my back, wrapping her arms around my neck, her mouth next to my ears so that I could hear those terrible hiccuping sounds up close. I shook her off me, knocking her to the floor. I felt a searing pain in my back as she went, but I tore open the front door and bolted to my car. Chris was standing in the front yard, talking on the phone with the police. I didn't say a word, I just ran to my car and jumped in. Chris took the hint and followed me, still online with 911. I watched the rearview mirror. Sure, I'd see her there, running after us. But I never did. I went straight to the ER and got 11 stitches in my arm and 3 on my back. The police asked a lot of questions and went back to the house to do a search. But of course, Lynn wasn't there. They advised me to stay with a friend or relative for a while and to file a restraining order as soon as I could. But none of those things would matter. Somehow, I just knew. I dropped Chris off at home and went to a motel an hour away. I wanted to put as much distance between me and Lynn as I could. This is where I've been for the last 4 hours. I thought maybe the police would find her. Maybe they'd get her the help she desperately needs. But now, I don't think so, because 40 minutes ago, I got a text from an unknown number. Just 3 words: I found you, and a picture attached. The picture was dark and grainy, but I instantly knew what it was. There was no mistaking my wife's eye. I started typing and recording this immediately after. I don't know what to do. I'm alone and scared, and I can't help but feel that I am being watched.